You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin the Cleric.
And me, Paul Brophy. And today, Roisin, we're down in the lovely setting that is Kilmacow Community Centre. We've had a look around, it's absolutely fabulous. And we're here having a cup of coffee with Labour Party Councillor for the Piltown District, Tomas Breathnach. Tomas, you're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the invitation to participate in the programme.
Well, Tomas, as you know, when Paul and I were in the Labour Party, we used to look forward to when you were at the meetings in the clubhouse in Kilkenny, because Paul and I, you'd be sitting beside you, and we'd be looking to listen to your stories and your wise wisdom about life and politics and society. So it is really an honour for us to come down and speak to you in Kilmacow.
And thanks for the compliment. I appreciate it.
And it's sincere.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, and just to give our viewers and our listeners a little bit of background, Tomas was first elected to Kilkenny County Council in 2004. You were co-opted, Tomas, after your brother Joe Walsh stepped down in 1999. So you were a councillor for 6 months, but unfortunately you weren't able to hold a seat in 99. But by God, you certainly changed it up in 2004 when. In 99, you lost out by, you were telling me, by 38 votes. And in 2004, you took the 39th step, which was getting elected. And you've been a councillor ever since. And you were also chairman of Kilkenny County Council in 2008. And interestingly as well, Roisin, the same day Tomas was elected chairman of Kilkenny County Council, your late brother Jack was elected mayor of Waterford City. I don't think that's ever happened before. So that must have been a really special day, Tomas.
Yeah, huge honour for, I suppose, we were both Labour Party candidates in the elections, and obviously representing the Labour Party as a family. It was huge. For Kilmacow people, it was great. And I suppose, in a sense, if we had to write a script, we couldn't have written a script like it. And if we had to plot and connive to arrange it, we couldn't even have anticipated it. And of course, we say later in the year that in September 2008, Waterford got to the All-Ireland. So if you know you're up for the match, you're sitting in an RT studio, brother Jack alongside me, one representing Kilkenny, the other representing Waterford. And it was a fabulous time, Joe. Yeah. And it was great. Just if I give you an example, Jack coming out in the mayor's car out to Kilmacow, we had to negotiate safe passage for him to County Kilkenny. But it was a fabulous time for the family, and one I think that we say, from my own point of view, you never had a more proud person chairman of the council in Kilkenny, and from a Waterford point of view, you never had somebody who really appreciated being mayor of Waterford and the support and everything that he got there. He was, because he was, in fairness to him, he was embedded in Waterford for over 40 years, and his life revolved around it. So it was a great time, yeah.
And did you always come from a Labour Party family?
We're an interesting question in that my mother was a very, very strong Labour Party person. She originally from Scotland, and our family on the Scottish side would have a strong Labour Party tradition. If I give an example, you might have heard of the steelworks in Ravenscraig, where my grandfather worked. He worked there, and he would have been involved in union politics and Labour Party over there. My uncle Tom worked in the mines and would have been a great, again, union organiser and involved in the Labour Party there. So from that side of the family, we say there was a great Labour tradition. And then from my father's side, there was more Republican tradition in it. So and being from a big family, you can imagine that our house in the street just down the road from here was a place where there was always debate going on, and you had all the different kind of the elements of it, because my grandfather would have been more a Fine Gael person in his tradition. But so what I'd say from my own point of view, I had all the traditions coursing through me. And I think the best way to say maybe exercise the different political dimensions that come into you is, we'd say, and I think my name would be very much a community person, where you respect all the different traditions. And I think from that point of view, and I'd like to think part of my work over the last 20 odd years as a councillor would have shown the respect to other parties in that they have their traditions as I have mine. You can be proud of your own without knocking somebody else's.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the whole ethos, if you like, is to collaborate with everybody. So if you have that, you progress together, respecting everybody's point of view. So yeah, it's certainly an interesting household to come out of. Huge debates over many years, and in fairness to both my parents, they encouraged it, and all of us did get involved in it. There was 13 of us
Wow.
in children in it, and from the youngest to the oldest, we all had strong views. So you had to, I suppose, make your case. But the nature of the family is we were very fortunate in that we all liked our own companies. You know what I mean? So as a family, it was great, but we were all able to argue our case with each other. And then obviously, when we progressed further, I was very fortunate in where I lived in the upper street, because next door to me is, for a lot of people from Kilmacow, was the RH Hall, and that was the nerve centre of Kilmacow. So as somebody who walked out next door, you walked into a youth club, and your formative steps, if you like, in terms of involvement in local community came to that youth club, and we've been there ever since. Do you know what I mean? So it's a lifetime of, from my point of view, involvement in the different aspects of it, and you carry that on into the council right up to the present time.
Oh. And of course, sport would have been also a big part of your family as well. Your brother Joe played hurling for Kilkenny and played for local club Kilmacow, and you played soccer for Kilmacow. And it's great to see. Did you spot this, Rush? You have the GAA club and the soccer club right beside one another. Right, it's very, very rare you see that in the community. You see both codes together. So it kind of just highlights, I suppose, the tight knit nature of the community here in Kilmacow.
Yeah, it's a strong identity in Kilmacow. It would say, I mean, I was fortunate, and if you took a look at the various elements of someone like myself would call it the farm, the sports complex, more modern name for it, but we'd say you had the soccer pitch, you went across, you had the hurling pitch, you had the athletic track, you could swim, you had the tennis court, so you had, up here you had the badminton court. So I mean, you could, if you were looking for a sporting outlet in Kilmacow, there was always one that you could gravitate towards. I was fortunate; I was sporty all my life, and I think it was 6 of the different the sports that were available in Kilmacow. I was able to hurl and play football for 20 years. I played soccer for 25 years. I played badminton for maybe 5 years. I ran with the athletic club. I 5 marathons done. Do you know what I mean? So all of those were great from my own point of view, and I'd look back even now and say, never regretted a minute of them. You know what I mean? And the one thing that I do say about sport, no matter what the achievement is, you can win medals all over the place, but the friendships that you make through sport last a lifetime, and they're, to me, the most valuable legacy that comes from sport. So, when young people are encouraged to go into sports and things like that, the friendships that they make, they'll stay with them all their lives. So it's a great thing, and I was very, very fortunate to have those opportunities provided to me in a place like Kilmacow, and still to this day grateful to all those people who made those facilities available to me and looked after me in terms of training, bringing me to matches and things like that. And I would like to think that we say the help that they gave me, that I've reciprocated it in time since.
Yeah. What inspired you, Tomas, to enter politics and run as a county councillor?
I don't know, is inspiration the word?
What motivated you?
Yeah, I think it was a natural progression from my point of view. Remember, I was saying the big family, we say, first of all, and then next door was the RH. But we say we had an issue of principle in that youth club. It was to do with the acceptance of women into the club. So those of us who would have wanted to see women when I say we were obviously teenagers at the time, But we'd say it, and it's difficult now looking back, but there was a reluctance. So what we did is we formed a new club up here where girls and fellas could come, and then we say we negotiated to get back together, so the club became one club. And at the time, it was a fabulous, fabulous club because it had things like all the games that we were talking about. It led to the formation of the soccer club. We had a common Gaelic. We had our own newspaper, kind of, we called it Forward. Now it was simplified, but it kept everybody up to date with top charts and what was going on. We'd say we used to have a political and social study group. So there was huge dimensions to table quizzes, debatings, plus all the games. But then what happened then is, say, from my own point of view, is the nature of getting involved in those allowed you to get involved with other things. In the first instance, social, they say the sports that we were talking about earlier on. But then what it became then is, and there's been times in Kilmacow where it has been, particularly it has flourished different organisations. Say, from my point of view, you had a development group, you had a town twinning, you had the tidy towns, you had, say, the hospice, my own, we spoke about earlier on. And when I look back on it now and I think of all the friendships and everything else that I've built over the years, we'd say, in the first instance I mentioned earlier on about sport, but I think of all those groups and organisations that you were involved in then. And then going into the council then, it just seemed a natural progression that we'd say people had maybe seen the way that I worked locally and kind of asked me if I'd make to stand for the election then after you mentioned my brother Joe was stepping down. And I did. Unfortunately, the first time I didn't make it, but the second time did. And we say
38 votes you missed out by.
I did. I called, I saying it earlier on, the campaign for 2004, I called it the 39 steps. And I looked back and analysed what had maybe lost me votes in the previous. And we'd say, and then the 39th step, actually, I was saying to Paul earlier on, jokingly, was to bring in the musical element into my campaign. I remember the three songs were, I would walk 500 miles.
Yes.
So to keep knock on your door looking for your vote, that was my thing. It's got to be, if you remember the Fairford Convention, I think had a song, it's got to be perfect. But I used to have Breathnach. They say it used to be Breathnach. And then the other thing was, if you remember, UB40 was the group, and they had a song, very politically astute song. It was called The 1 in 10. And it was a reflection on Thatcher's Britain, if you remember that. But what my point was to anybody that was joining me on that campaign, because I asked them to walk with me a bit, but we were looking for the 1 in 10 that would get me elected. That was the idea. And so it worked. And I remember that election now, Bobby Elder was elected first, if I remember correctly.
He was lovely.
Absolutely. All of us mad about him, and awful sad then when he passed away. But we'd say, but I remember coming in second to him, coming into a legend, coming second to a legend. And it was, I can remember one time a lady down near New Ross ringing me and she said, now, and again, it shows you the importance of your campaign team. She says, I remember a guy canvassing with you. All I know is he had a Celtic jersey on him. I know to this day who called to that door. Yeah. But the impression he made on my behalf with that lady was such that she rang me. Do you know what I mean? And so when people do get involved in helping out in campaigns and things like that, it does matter. And the way they interact with people is awfully, awfully important. So that's the good side of politics,
And you could say that Bobby Elwood is why we're sitting here talking to you today, because Bobby was he was one of my, what's it called?
Subjects.
One of my subjects in my dissertation, in my media and public relations dissertation, in the comparative analysis of male and females' political media experiences.
Yeah.
And then I loved formats in college. So then we came up with the format of the woman-to-woman show. Paul, you were there too. And that's why we're sitting here today. So, and I found the audio the other day of the interview with Bobby Aylward. I'd love to put that up on the YouTube channel because it was really lovely.
Good. Yeah. No, we've all, you know, huge regard for him, even still. You know, and his. If I say that he has a presence, if you know what I mean, even still, for a lot of people, that and all you have to do is say Bobby. You don't need to say any more. You know, to just Bobby. You know, and it said an awful lot about the huge personality that he was. And no matter what political persuasion you were, you couldn't but gravitate to him. But he reciprocated in kind. You know what I mean? He was an absolute gentleman. And you know, when you look through, I've always said about politics, you make more friends than you make enemies. Do you know what I mean? And when you look back and say people that you worked with, you know, he's the person that I would say stands out for me as someone that I got on awfully well with, and I have huge regard for.
First ever episode of the Irish Political Roundup was a tribute to Bobby Aylward.
And that was lovely.
That's maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah, and it was really important because the Irish Political Roundup was an extension of the radio format that I developed and then onto YouTube. So, Bobby was part of that. I say Bobby, Bobby Aylward, John Paul Phelan, and Kathleen Function. I think that was the Kilkenny, the Kilkenny, and Aidan O'Riordan, and the people before Prophet. No, not people. Yeah. Claire Daly. I never met Claire. She just answered the emails. I never met her, and I remember that day when I went up to Leinster House. Bobby Aylward brought me up to his office in Government Building, and Lawrence, his assistant, he made me a lovely cup of coffee and charged my phone that day. And that was that kindness that extended what you're talking about to even who worked with him.
Yeah, no, it pervaded everything involved in them.
Yeah. So we are down here in Kilmacow, and when I came into this centre, the community centre, the first thing I said was, "Wow,
yeah,
it's amazing."
Yes, it is. It is.
Tell us about this, and then we'll get into the ways and bouts of what the issues that are coming up on the door.
Maybe what I might do, Roisin, if it's okay with you, because I know we spoke before we went on air about the pride of place that Kilmacow won in 2019.
Yes.
And if I mention that, for one reason, we kind of based it on, we say, the sports complex that you're very complimentary about earlier on, about the hall here, and then Rosedale, the residential home that we have. Now, we're blessed in Kilmacow that we have these facilities so close to each other. Now, the one thing that I have to say is they didn't come without an awful lot of work from local people who have committed their time, their energies, their money, you know, everything to the development of these with huge pride and has sustained them over the years, the continuous development of them. And it's ongoing even as we speak, you know what I mean? If I just give you an example, you might have seen on the footbridge down in the over to the complex, it needs to be replaced, and there's a project in now. It's going to be about 200,000 of a project. That's between that and the walk and a new walkway to go in. That we'd say that is a continually upgrading the sports complex, and there's a very, very dynamic committee down there. Likewise, there's people here who come here. We say that we have our parish lotto, and they're here every Thursday night. It's just the routine it's part of their lives, and they commit themselves to it. There's no fuss, there's no big deal. They're just here. But what that lotto does is puts in a base funding that allows the community centre committee then to access other funding, whether it's from the council, from Leader, you know, the sports capital, or whatever the case may be. And then we're up in Rosedale, and we have a facility above. If I remember correctly, there's about 16 chalets up there. We have, I think it's 15 maybe in the main house. So you have over 30 people in being accommodated in their local communities.
Yes.
And it means then that, just say, for instance, if I want to go to the shop I just have to walk down the road. If I want to go to Mass, I'm just down the road. If I want my lift into town, ring a link will come up, bring me in. If I want to go down a walk around the farm, as I call it, the sports complex, I can just go down. So everything is here and maintained to a very, very high standard. But the other thing is why I say about the pride of place is that when we did all the groups and organisations, we did a kind of, you can imagine a big wall. And we just put the names of all the clubs and organisations on the wall. So you had the soccer club, you had the town twinning, you had the hospice, you had the graveyard committee, you had everything. But what we were doing is we were saying, yes, it's about the facilities, and wow, like you said, but it's what they facilitate for the people of Kilmacow. So if I have the river Blackwater flowing down through the village, if I want to walk, I can walk up by the river Blackwater, up to places that I call the Black Pool, the Weir, the Pond, up to the Highfield, around by the hurling pitch, down to Gooch's Road, walk to the lower street, walk around and back. That is something I could meet 5 or 6 different people on the course of that walk. I stop, I chat. It's part of the interaction with people locally. It may be somebody from Rosedale coming down to the shop and they meet a neighbour or someone they hadn't seen for a while, but it's because they're local, they have access to people, you know, and as I said earlier on, if they want their, say, to access town for services or the bank or whatever the case, they have that facility with Reelected. They have bus airing on a Thursday, they can go in on it. So there's those aspects. You have the Brothers of Charity in the Mews up at Rosedale, so they come down here. And then it means then that if you take somebody, that once they start, like if you start in the school across the way, the teachers, they use the facilities here, they use the facilities down the sports complex, you have interaction between the school and Rosedale. So you have all the kind of interactions that are, and they're making the quality of life better for everyone. And if your concept of politics that we were talking about earlier on is people coming together to organise things, to make things better for people, isn't that a lovely kind of politics to have? And people do it and gain from it in the giving you're getting, if you know what I mean. And the one thing that we emphasised to the judges that day was, yes, we have great facilities, and yes, they were amazed at what they were. But the one thing we made them to understand is the full appreciation of those facilities is what they do for people and the quality of life that they benefit, that benefits them as a result. And that's why we say, if you looked at politics now in terms of the council, probably now obviously housing is a special case as a councillor because of the housing crisis. But we say one of the busiest sections of the council nowadays is the community section. And what the work that they do, and it traverses different aspects of it, because it traverses into the environment, you know, biodiversity, all those, the tidy towns and everything else. But one of the things that it has done over the years, it has allowed the councils and local communities to align better together, so that local communities can now look to their councils for support, you know what I mean? And the relationship between the councils and the local communities has become more positive as a result. So, it's a positive development all the time, and it's the nature of life to evolve, and that evolution of the relationships between people and their, local communities and their council is something that I think is a very exciting thing to be happening, and from my point of view, to be involved in, because you're part of that change that it has occurred, so, and you'd hope you're contributing to it.
To me, that's what politics is about. It's about representing the people and finding solutions to local communities, because all politics starts locally, looking after the local communities in the rural area, in the villages and towns of the county.
Absolutely. And we'd say Now, some people think in politics in terms of hierarchy. I don't. We say, again, I'm referring back to a conversation we had before the meeting, but I use the analogy of the back of the clock, that an awful lot of people watch the face of the clock because they see the hands going around and everything else. But really, where the work is, it's not at the front of the clock, it's at the back. It's the interactions between all. If I go through the back of the watch or the back of the clock, you look at the wheels, you look at the cogs, you look at all the mechanisms that are working together, coordinated, you know what I mean, together. Mm-hmm. And the impacts of all of those together are the things that improve the quality of life for everyone. But the key thing is it's working together. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And if I just it's just a thought, like one of the things I did was to design a crest for Ferrybank. But the motto that I use for it is on Thalava as Tarring the Cllr. What it means is the benefit of working together is the nature of it. And now if I could just to kind of, because I see here the Ferrybank thing is because we did it as Ferrybank Tidy Towns, but the idea behind it was that instead of taking a waste paper basket as the symbol of the Tidy Towns, we said Ferrybank gets its name from the ferry going across. So the image for the crest for Ferrybank is based on the old ferry, the two people working together to get from one side of the river shore to the other, the Kilkenny side to the Waterford side. And then we say the two of them working together helps everybody to get from one side to the other. You have a problem, you work together to get the solution. You need to get someplace, someone brings you. You know what I mean? And then the great thing about it, from my point of view, is the river is seen as a means of communication, not a division between two counties and two peoples. Yeah. So that's an important thing. But the essence of it, to go back to where I was saying, the benefit of working together. And to me, what that is, you take people, no matter what group you are, a committee meeting here together. That's what they're doing. They're meeting together, working together. And the immediate impact of their work is the benefit of our club or, you know, the people involved. But don't forget that involvement and those benefits kind of are distilled out to others. So it's not just them as individuals, but their families and then the wider community. And if you take it, just to say a simple little thing, like a team playing well and they win a league, and you just look at a whole host of people standing around the pitch shouting on that team as they win. What have they done? Over the course of the year, they've brought a lot of people together and involved them in something. And without that success and without that work, those people would never be there in the first, you know what I mean, when the time came. So we do need to have an appreciation of that work and the benefits of that work. So, and for a lot of people, say when we were talking earlier on about sport, you know, a lot of people, the big benefit socially to them in their lives has been sport, right? Now, that might be more beneficial to them than a lot of the other things that kind of catch the headlines. And the importance of that work needs to be recognised. And I take my hat off to everybody that's involved in, and I like to think, just as an individual, that I still retain that ability to work with people, you know what I mean, and to achieve those kind of objectives. Because certainly there's two things I'd say with regard to them. One is work is its own reward, that, you know, it doesn't need any other recompense. The work itself is. And then for a lot of us who have been involved in different things, just like I said earlier on, you've made more friendships out of them. And they do not only affect the quality of life for others, but they also affect the quality of your own life. You know what I mean? So you gain from it. That's why I say it's its own reward. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Tomas, you mentioned there, housing is a big issue. We're beyond the crisis stage at this point. What are the other big issues you're seeing coming up during your work on Kilkenny County Council?
We'd say what can happen is, we'd say, and I go in, we're talking about local elections there. When you go into a local election, you try and identify maybe broadly what you think are going to be the things that come up. But elections generate their own issues. And if I were taking, say, for instance, the last couple of elections, particularly the last two, health became, and particularly mental health became a huge issue for me. And we'd say, at times, how would I call it, the frustration, if I could, but it's not my job to get frustrated, but we'd say because it's my job to kind of navigate my way through different things. But it does take time, and people need to allow you the space and the time to come up with because you can't magic things all the time. But we'd say that would be one of them. And then we'd say, and I saw it in the last, if I say the last general election, and I do not mean it in any criticism of people, but just we'd say what there was a kind of an element of when the housing crisis was being discussed, it was kind of Party X saying we'll build 45,000 a year. Party Y would say we'll do 48, and Party C or D or G saying we'll do 50,000. But there needed to be, from my point of view, a more root and branch examination of the causes of the housing crisis. And one of the things, for instance, is the lack of infrastructure. And you might have seen recently in Kilkenny County Council now had a motion about the wastewater treatment, wastewater systems for the small towns and villages, because you take a place like, we say, and it's we say in South Kilkenny, a place like Roundup, say, for instance, but you also fit down Piltown, where you have capacity issues. And without addressing the capacity issues of the sewerage schemes, you can't have the housing that you need to solve the housing. Yeah. So in the concept behind, or the practical side of the motion that I brought forward was, say to the department, look, if we're really serious about housing, we need to kind of invest in the infrastructure that will enable those houses to be built. And we'd say, there are other aspects. If I just take a thing about Kilmacow, you drove through the roads here this evening.
You navigated me in.
I navigated. But we say we have a very narrow road network here. You know, we say it was grand 20 years ago, but there's been, as you see, development occurring in Kilmacow. And we'd say that one of the things that we're looking at is maybe that we might have a one-way system around to maybe allow the free or movement of traffic within the place, and allow, if you like, Kilmacow now obviously to develop in a way that, because I was mentioning earlier on about our new master plan, but we'd say, but to allow it to develop in a way that doesn't bog us down because of the lack of proper infrastructure to allow us to navigate our way around the streets and everything else. You know, that is not to say that you let the car dominate and everything else, but you have to be practical. You're living in a rural area. People do need access to outwards and inwards. And we say we're an agricultural community, so you do have things like tractors and lorries going up the road. So you have to try and have a vision that encompasses everything, and to come up with a solution that allows all the permutations to be considered, and then come out with what I call the optimum solution, whatever best suits Kilmacow. Now that might be a different solution someplace else, but we'd say that when you're asking about housing, that would be one of the things. Say a restriction that that Kilmacow has to deal with before any more development takes place. You know, it has to move on because the infrastructure has to allow it to develop.
And settle down in Kilmacow.
The answer is yes. Be straight with it. You mentioned earlier on your own view of Kilmacow. You know, when you looked around and the place, the lovely place it is, the rural setting that it has, the village scale that it has. it has a tremendous community ethos and a quality of life here that we're very, very appreciative of. We're also very mindful of and want to protect it. And because of that, we say there are people who, for different reasons, maybe to go abroad, maybe for training, maybe a sense of trying, maybe as young people, to get the adventure and things, maybe going to places like Canada, Australia, or even, we say, move away within Ireland. But we'd say they have a very strong affection for the place. And it is, I suppose, a kind of a testament to the place that a lot of them do want to come back, if not straight away, but eventually. So that strong draw is there to come back. And I suppose it's a compliment to the quality of life that we had. And then it's to, now the expression I use is accommodate and integrate with regard to development. That we'd say that new development, you has to be able to be accommodated within the existing development. It doesn't overpower it. It doesn't kind of, as one person said to me in another part of Kilkenny, she said, I feel like a stranger in my own village, because what had happened is that so much development took place in so short a time that she kind of felt it was overpowering. And I think, I think in fairness to the council, over the last 10, 15 years, they've reined in things to kind of control the rate at which development takes place, so that it's managed, so that you can accommodate the change. You allow the new people, if they're new or returning people, to integrate back into it, and then you can move on again. But that is the role of the infrastructure, to allow that, continual evolution of communities to occur. But in answer to your question, yes, there are people, and it's important that you recognise that they do want to come back, and then but they're coming back for something that you're mindful of what attracted them to come back, so that when they do come back, they find exactly the home that they were looking for and that they dreamed of. And it's the nature of people like that, who, because what they do is they re-energize a village. A place like Kilmacow, we'd say, continually regenerates itself. And we'd say that is important no matter what village you are. And by the way, when I talk of village, we're inclined to think in, and I'm sure most people locally in other places in South Kilkenny and in Kilkenny would tend to think in terms of the parish rather than just simply the village, because you do have that wider kind of thing, because you're as much, if your town's land is Moodham or Tinvalcoos, you're as much part of Kilmacow as you are from the upper street, you know what I mean? And but it's great that we've minded all our town stands and our names and everything else, because they are part of what the heritage of Kilmacow is, and every other village or parish, maybe I might say. And there is an argument for maybe, in time, maybe we might regard the parishes as a kind of a civic rather than just simply a purely religious kind of division, you know what I mean? But that is something that would have evolved, I think, in time.
And Tomas, you mentioned the water infrastructure.
Yes.
Roisin, we've been interviewing a number of county councillors, not just in Kilkenny but outside Kilkenny, and this keeps coming up. It is a massive issue. Is Irish Water capable of dealing with this issue? Are they underfunded? Should what Irish Water is doing, should that go back into the county councils? What are your views on that?
Oh, yes, yeah. I have huge regard for Irish Water. I'm going to say that straight. And certainly in all my dealings with officials from Irish Water, I could not say a bad word about them. They've been excellent to deal with. I think we'd say if we were back 15 years ago, I think we might have had a different model. I was a great fan of, say, for instance, the council. You know, I could ring X, I could ring Y at any stage, and we say there was a huge corporate memory there of, you know, all pipework networks and everything else. But we'd say the truth of it is that there was a need for this huge investment in the infrastructure. And then I think, you know, if everybody could go back and say, could we have looked at it a different way? Because the whole debate came down on the funding of Irish Water with the issue of water charges. It never really became the vision for this service that was to be facilitated by that. And what has happened, say from my point of view, is, now when I say mine, it's, I mean as a point of view maybe, is that the shortfall in funding, that the absence of water charges. Now, I'm not getting into the debate about it, because that to me is gone. You know what I mean? But we'd say the absence of a commitment to fill in where the water charges were to go has resulted in this huge blockage towards development. In that, we'd say, now, if I just give an example, now, anecdotally, I can't stand over the figure, but we'd say the figure that I heard spoken about for the small towns and villages previously was 130 million, we'd say. Right. Now, what I did, the idea behind the motion was, now, the essence of it is adequate funding, but I put a floor under it if it was 130 million before, and I'm not sure that it was, so I want to be clear that it's standing over the figure. It's an indicative figure I'm given. I was saying, look, make it 500 million, but whatever it takes, allow that funding to take place, because without the funding, the planning can't start, because you can't plan, because all the planning itself is intensive, and it consumes a lot of funding of its nature. You know, you just simply can't come in and put in pipe network here. You know, you have to plan it, and you have to get all the consents, and you have the compulsory purchases, and you have the levels and everything else that there is to go with it. So it's a huge thing. So even if you began saying, we're going to start a scheme without all that planning and everything else, you're still looking at years. But you need something to allow it to commence. And you can't, if you like, something that happened with the roads, I think, which was a wrong thing to happen, you can't let it off and then pull up the handbrake on the funding. You have to let the thing progress to its conclusion. I'd see that with the you know, particularly the wastewater. And the reason I mention that particularly is, we'd say, because that's capital intensive, more capital intensive than just simply the water supplies. But I understand that Irish Water will put an emphasis on water supplies, because a lot of the fines that we get from Europe are because of maybe deficiencies, and, you know, with standards on supplies and things. But we can't have the phased development of communities, and that we do need, without the adequate supply, adequate infrastructure. And I go back to that that point, and that needs a lot of planning and everything else. Yeah. But it's not the, what would I call it? It's like the back of the clock thing that I'm talking about. It's not the high profile stuff, but it is the stuff that affects the planning, and it needs to underpin the planning going forward.
No. Absolutely. And even people who might build houses in the last few years, they're being hit with connection charges like 5,000-6,000 euros, maybe even more in some cases. So those connection charges are plugging gaps that, you know, really shouldn't be. It should be more funded adequately
At national level. No, and we say, I think that is the case. And then the other thing, if you're looking at it from a national point of view, and I know a lot of people are a bit concerned about what's happening internationally at the present time, but the best safeguard that we have as a country is to rely on our own genius. In time we are going to have to rely more on indigenous industry, indigenous crafts, what I mean, what we can produce ourselves. It is the nature of what is going to happen. And what it will do is it'll give us a stability as a country, but what it'll also do is it'll allow us withstand the vagaries of international winds that may be favourable sometimes, but also sometimes may not be favourable. And, the word is talking about resilience. It was a great word back in 10 years ago, but it's still a word which has a resonance with me now. And for a country going forward, we'd actually need it. And given the vagaries of what is happening internationally, I think, because if you were to go back, and people forget this, if you were to go back into the noughties and the early teens, you had someone like Vladimir Putin being part of the G8. He was walking around with all the leaders of the West. Now he's a pariah. You know what I mean? Because of what happened in Ukraine, what's happening in in Gaza is a huge kind of. You have the concern in Pakistan and India at the present time. You have the tensions in the China Seas because you have Taiwan and China. So there's all those kind of tensions around, and maybe there's a little element of countries need to kind of build up their own networks of to be able to provide. But that being said, I think it was the French philosopher Montesquieu, I think, said it, that trade was a great peacemaker. And he was absolutely right, because international trade helps countries to cooperate with each other and all those networks. And one of the things I'd worry about is if we become this closing off that people maybe are talking about, I'd worry about that. Trade is a great peacemaker. If you're trading with somebody, you have a vested interest in their progress and they in yours. You supply them, they supply you. It's a two-way, and we'd say, I just think that we're great as a country, as Irish people, because we have that natural outgoing ability to get on with people and everything else. And that's not chauvinism or anything else. It's a natural thing that we do have. And Irish people for years have benefited from that. But at the same time, what we need to do is make this country ourselves a bit more able to withstand, and so that when the next upturn comes or the next shock to the system comes, that we mightn't need to be as concerned as we are at the present time. Because for someone like myself, I don't understand. I've used the thing about diplomacy. I can't understand diplomacy being in a tweet. I can't understand that. We used to have, networks of people who were involved in foreign policy. You had your departments who kind of negotiated with other countries. You had deals and everything else. Now it can be you're this today, that tomorrow. But that won't always continue. And there are, I suppose, one of the things that we say the EU has done is it kind of, now I use the difference between reacting and responding. There's a difference between the two of them.
Yes.
And I would say, I think what we're doing is you're not reacting, you're steadying yourself, you're looking at your options, and you respond appropriately. Whatever the best strategy is for us as a country progressing into the future is the way. And in fairness, that is the way that things have operated, for the last year or two anyway, when things have kind of changed, But it is, and with the world being unstable, we need to kind of be stable ourselves. You
We need
know?
to be self-sufficient and self-reliant.
Yeah, but sometimes when you say that, people can see that as I would see the huge benefits of trading with others. Do you know what I mean? But it's
We have to be able to export and
absolutely.
import, but most of all, we have to look after, be self-sufficient in our food, in our electricity and energy,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
in our health, in everything, and even in our own employment as well, and be self-reliant. And most of all, I think too, it's about our food, our agriculture, looking after our agriculture, looking after our fisheries, because we don't have food, we can't survive.
Well, you're right, and I think what it would be, Roisin, I think is a kind of a depth to the economy, and a depth to, we say, just even if I say it, that when you talk about Irish food now, for instance, it has rightly this great image as, you know, environmentally friendly in its production processes and everything else, and it's awful important that we protect those.
Yes.
And we'd say, so when we're trading, I was saying earlier on, that we're trading at the very high end of the quality network, if I put it that way. And that's where Ireland as a country should be going, because we're good at it. You know, we have a name for it. And if Irish people were to kind of optimize as its production, as, you know, no matter what sphere, whether it's craft, food production or not, but note, by the way, we have the name in the crafts. Note, we have it in food production. We have it in technology. We have it in financial services. So on that high end, we have those qualities that the world is seeking. So let's make the best of those as we go forward. And it's an exciting, if I were just looking at young people growing up now, and they're growing up into that world, I think it's
amazing.
I think it's amazing the opportunities that are there for them.
And Ireland's always been known as highly educated.
Absolutely.
We've always had that, the land of the scholars and educated and skilled.
Yes.
And that's something that we, and go back to, the, as you said, the trade. We don't, and tradesmen, go back to apprenticeships, go back to helping people within our community. And also it's really interesting too that, you know, we talk about that we're agriculture country. You can't even get wool anymore, and the sheep farmers, it's not worth it to them economically to actually provide wool for iron jumpers anymore. So we're known for our fabrics and our woolen mills as well.
Yeah, but I think we need to kind of relook at all those, and you have to, we'd say, like, we did have a kind of a, I don't know what you call it, a policy, but we had a practice of kind of seeking to survive self-sufficient. But it closed. It was a closed world. What we've done, I would say, as a country since the 60s particularly, is we've opened. And in that opening, you allow a lot of light in, you know, and it's to use that light, you know, to inform our decisions going forward. And I think, to be honest, the Irish people are entitled to have a lot of self-confidence from the way they've navigated the last, you know, we've all seen bad times in the 70s, in the noughties, you know, in the 80s, even in the noughties. We saw a bad time, but we recovered from it. And we maybe, you know, as I say, for younger people growing up, you've left the place, I think, a better place for them going forward. And, you know, you'd kind of hope, no matter what your work is, say locally, say on the council, in my case, or if you're, you know, operating at national level, you'd like to think that your work helped to make the place a better place, one, but gave it the potential to be a better place even further on. That's,
yeah, exactly. It's not, you're leaving things in a better place than what you found. It is about moving it forward. And another important thing about moving things forward, you're here in South Kilkenny, you're very, very close to Waterford. There's a big rivalry on the sporting front, but yourself and your other colleagues in the Piltown district, you had a motion about supporting the development of Waterford Airport. It's been something that's been talked about for a long time. There's been many ups and downs with it, but it's something that if that could get the green light as regards funding, it would be massive for not just Waterford but the southeast in general.
Yes, we'll say it's a regional issue, and we'd say I think maybe in Ireland we don't appreciate enough the concept of regions. That we'd say personally I regret. We had the Southeast Regional Authority, but is back in when the cutbacks came in 2014, the regional authority as we knew it was kind of ceased, and now we do have the Southern Assembly. We do have the other assemblies. The West and North and Midlands, but we'd say what I do think there's a role for a Southeast Forum. And I know when you're talking about motions earlier on, that's one of the motions now that I had. I might actually reactivate it now when as a result of this now, because you're reminding me of it. But we'd say there are certain things, like if I were going back, we'd say the likes of we'd say there's certain things like tourism. There's certain things like say going back to broadband. There's certain things like just even say it's a very controversial thing about the wind energy, and we'd say the fact that you can have proposals that are on the borders of one county, looking in, and we say you need the guidelines, and it'd be great if we had guidelines, at the southeast that we could. And in recent times now, for instance, I mentioned again, I kind of jokingly say about what I call the wise way. Now it's my own pet name on it, but walking in the southeast, because we have, we say the possibilities of connecting up all the walkways in the southeast. Yes. And we'd say just even if I just take, you might have seen the sustainable transport bridge coming across into Waterford. We'd say you have the walkway, the coming from Bilberry, the Daisha Greenway coming across. It'll come across that sustainable transport bridge. It'll go on to the North Quays, and it'll go on then to up towards New Ross on the Kilkenny Greenway. And then there's the possibility of, it's been looked at, the Greenway from, say, connection to the likes of Woodstock, so there's all, it's been looked at. So there's all these possibilities, but wouldn't it be great if and one of the things, say again, I had said it from the very, very outset, a lot of the greenways are based on the old railway tracks. And I think the southeast had a great tradition on the railways, the different. Yeah. And if we could have even a place in the southeast where all the memorabilia and all the history of the railways could be brought together in one place, where, it'd be an important element of the offer that the southeast would have. But kind of think of somebody coming into Rosslare on the boat coming across from, say, the Ave or in from Pembroke or whatever the case may be, and whether they're walking on a bicycle or whatever, to be able to cycle that into the country, in time that would happen. But the first place that you'd capture them would be in the southeast, and but we'd say, I just think that we need that. And then when you were talking about, we say the infrastructure, we're back to that. Yeah. And I go back to that thing of trade, that we say if we had the support for the airport, in the southeast, is awful important. And I've always said with regard to Kilkenny, and it's a particular responsibility I feel that Kilkenny has. If you look at it, we've Wexford, we've Carlow, you've South Tipperary, you've Waterford. The 5 counties of the southeast are all on the borders of Kilkenny. We have a border, we share a border with each of them. So we're at the centre of it.
Kind of the meat in the sandwich.
Yes, and then and then the other thing is, we'd say, if you go back to that crest that I was saying about Ferrybank, we say when I had the boat. And again, it's a kind of, it's a pity now, and I don't have a copy of it here. But what I did is the oars go outside the frame of the if you see a picture, it's held within inside the boundary. But in this, the oars go outside. And the reason for it is that if Kilkenny and Waterford, as the two pictures, the two people are, if I call them, they're pulling together, the benefit goes to the whole region. It's not just Kilkenny, Waterford, but the whole region will benefit from that cooperation. And that's why I think all of us, when you know that now it's to me, as far as I'm concerned, it's over and done with history. Well, when there was a boundary issue there, I remember saying, and I don't want to go back, but I remember saying at the time, there was nothing that could be gained by a boundary extension that could surpass what would be the benefit from cooperation between the counties. And that is still and it's great, you're mentioning about, say, we meet Waterford regularly. We actually meet 3-4 times in a year, and there's great cooperation between us. And if I give the example of Ferrybank today, we say we have a community development group in Ferrybank, and I was there from Kilkenny, I think, and then you had you had 2 councillors from Waterford City Council at the meeting, and we got on. You had the community development officer for South Kilkenny there. You had the people from the new community safety partnerships from Waterford and Kilkenny there together. So the point I would make is that we say the benefits that will accrue from that interaction between all of them, it's a strength, not a weakness, being close to another county. And if we work that, we will bring benefit to far in excess of what you would do as individuals. It'll be you'll benefit from the interaction with the other, and that is something that you're going forward. When I say earlier on about making the place a better place, but leaving it with the potential to be better again, that is the key thing. And I think that's one of the things we'd say. I'd like to think in my time on the council that's where my focus would be.
You talk about the train station and the train tracks.
Yes.
There's one thing that when I'm speaking to an awful lot of people, they're saying there's no trains to Cork.
Yes.
There's no train facility. There's no connection. Do you think would it be possible in the future to have maybe a train that goes from Dublin, Waterford, Kilkenny, Waterford, Cork?
Would it be possible? Now, that is a major, huge planning issue. You know what I mean. And we'd say,
because years ago you could get a train all over the country.
Yeah, but we'd say now I'm of an age where used to go up to Limerick Junction to meet the Dublin train going down to Cork. And the most forlorn place, I hope nobody from Limerick Junction is listening to this, but it was the most forlorn station to walk up and down on waiting for that train to come. I do take the point of what you're saying, because I do think there's an element of train transport and developing of it. The development of it is could be great. I think it's certainly something that maybe could be explored, but it's something that, it's down, if you pardon the pun, it's down the tracks. Do you know what I mean? But it's certainly something. You see, all these things, you need to explore them. Sometimes people just dismiss them. But I'd often say, let's see if there's something in it. And fair enough, if you do your consideration of it and it's not possible, but there is a satisfaction in knowing that it was looked at. Now, I'm saying, I think I'm right in saying you have the train has come eastward to Middleton in Cork, as far as I'm aware. I think there's a train service, so that's one, but Middleton is still a long way. And then if you take the geography of West Waterford and East Cork, it's not an easy terrain to... No, it'll be something like the West Cllr Railway in the song. You're right there, Mikey. You're right.
Yeah.
You were in luck when you got to, where was it? Innis Diamond, because from there it was downhill all the way.
Yeah.
If I remember the song, do you know what I mean? So it can't be you're in luck when you get to Dungarvan, you know, because you'd actually have to get up to the top, up to Grange or someplace before you'd have to downhill. But it's certainly something that might be worth looking at in it and at a future. But we'd say, I understand the point you're making. And then what we have to do as a country, I think, is, you know, that whole, whether it's trains, buses, we do need to look at that whole concept of public transport. And we say to make that change. I remember 1 year, now maybe 3 years ago, when all the what do you call it, the difficulties with school transport came in, that one of the arguments that I remember sending a motion to the minister in the department at the time to take into account the environmental impacts of all the cars on the road, you know, say going to schools, and if they could, to provide buses to schools to the maximum possible extent, so that you took the cars, you know, that thing of coming to a school and the huge amount. And where possible, if kids could be picked up on a bus and brought to the school, so that the parents wouldn't have that thing of having to go, come back. And in a lot of cases, I think, you know, it might be incremental, the change that you would make. It mightn't be transformational in one go, but I do think if the concept was adopted, you might take, you know, it might be slowly but surely, you take cars off the road. Now, we're never going to be a car-free society. No, it's not. It's not practical. But what you do is where it is possible. And in fairness, the whole concept of transport is being looked at. I mean, in fairness to Transport for Ireland now, they're making a great effort to kind of provide new bus services and everything else. You're probably aware of that in the county of Kilkenny. And hopefully in, say, our own South Kilkenny, there's, you know, now it's kind of a thing I've been working on for the last couple of years with back and forth, is to get a new regular bus service. Remember I was saying about the Thursday bus service earlier on, but a daily service serving, say, coming from Waterford to Kilmacow, going on to Mullabat, up the old main road to Kilkenny, you know, so, and then if that service was coming back, and then the key things are regular service, affordable service, you know, reliability, you know, that they would be things then that with the additions of, you say, the bus stops and timetables and everything else, that people would become more friendly towards the idea of public transport. And it is a culture thing. I know people, we say, whose culture is, they don't think in terms of cars. They actually think in terms of, can I get there? When they get there, is by bus. Unfortunately, in Ireland, we don't have that concept because we didn't have the bus network that would have allowed us to have that. So I think, but I do think there's a change happening, and I just know in my own case that we'd say I put my focus on that, and that'll be my little contribution towards it. I'm not saying I'm doing it. I'm saying I'm promoting. We would say linking in with Transport for Ireland to see if that service can be delivered and frequent enough to make it people to say, I'll use that service. You know?
And what would be any other issues that are coming up within your constituents?
There's a load. There's a load. We'd say what tends to happen, say from my point of view, is we'd say now it's my nature. I'm a great believer in systems, and I kind of work to a system all the time. And the reason I do is because it optimizes the amount of work I can get out of myself. Now, and we say I don't mind work. You know what I mean? I'm not sure is it one of the if I'm trying to remember who it was now. It'll come to me in a minute. But I remember him saying, if you could play all the time, play becomes work.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And then someone else, I think it's someone else, kind of a similar quote becomes that we say, if you like what you're doing, right, you never have to retire, because you like, and go back to what I said earlier on about work being its own reward. And the reason I say that coming into it is because we'd say the nature of being a county councillor is incredible, that people don't appreciate it. We'd say I could get up in the morning with an intention of doing X, Y, and Z, but by 9 o'clock, that plan could be gone out the window because something may arise that I have to respond to straight away. You know what I mean? So it's the nature of it. And we'd say, and the other thing is, we'd say, and maybe I might go back kind of just to put the thing, for a lot of people, the role of a county council, they won't appreciate it until something goes wrong or something arises. And they look around and they say, who am I going to call here? They say, I call my local rep because there's someone locally that they can talk to. And that's good. And I'd always regard if someone rings me that I would do my best to help or contacts me. That's one. Two, the work is very challenging because people wouldn't ring you with something that isn't, that they could deal with themselves. They're looking for help because they need it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other side of it is it's very varied because I'm trying to think, even from today, all the kind of things. I've dealt with medical cards, I've dealt with roads, I've dealt with heritage, I've dealt with potholes, I've dealt with footpaths, I've dealt with grants, and all of that in the course of a normal day. So it's a very, very varied thing. And then we'd say what tends to happen then is that the issues that you were asking, what are the main ones coming up, they tend to kind of group into a number of things. Now, we said housing earlier on, and then I'm saying my number two would probably be, if I call them health-related things, but I would include in that, by the way, the likes of, the adaptation grants and things, because by their nature, it's somebody with maybe a disability or somebody elderly or something that requires them. And then we'd say what there will be is the infrastructural issues. It might be the footpath that needs repair. It might be a road that needs, to be resurfaced or whatever the case may be. And then we'd say you have then what I'd call the community development issues. And we'd say, and part of that is, say, for instance, if I give an example today, now I mentioned earlier on that I spent a day in Ferrybank because we had a community development. Now, the meeting is an hour, in fairness to the man that runs the meeting. He gives you. But we'd say what happens is the amount of preparation you have to do for that meeting, and then the follow-up that you have after it is huge. And then what I'd be awfully excited from it, because it is my background, we say that's part of the community development in Ferrybank, and it's an exciting place to be. But I'd never forget, we say from a Kilmacow perspective, that we have a new master plan. And that is something that, say, we say Kilmacow used to have 2002, it had a local area plan. It was updated in 2009, its local area plan. Then what happened with the local area plans is they were subsumed into the county development plans, and then there was at national level they had this core strategy. I don't know if you're familiar with the core strategy, but what it was a response to, you remember all the overzoning and everything else, and it was kind of going towards a more community friendly planning framework, if I call it that. And then the last couple of years, then we'd say in fairness to the council and the planning section, they put a huge effort into, and the consultants put a huge effort into developing, in consultation with local people here, a master plan for Kilmacow. And what we're at the present time is a foundation committee. There's 8 of us on it at the moment, working together to put, now we're calling ourselves a foundation committee at the moment, with the idea that you would actually have, if I call it, an implementation committee. Now it might be a community development group or some sort of master plan name in it. But the idea then is you take what Kilmacow has, you have the vision for it. The vision is agreed with people locally here at meetings. And then the idea is you take maybe the different issues like developing the amenities of the place, maybe addressing issues of infrastructure. Maybe there might be issues with maybe derelict sites, developing the potential of the river, making more amenities and available to local people, that you make Kilmacow a better place to live, notwithstanding the huge efforts that have been made to bring it up to the standard that we have in the present, to make it a better place into the future. So that work is ongoing. And I know there's a group in Mooncoin working that, you have rural regeneration up in Piltown. That's happening. You have the dynamic groups in the likes of Wooning, Mullavat Matters, which I'm a member of. You have we say the Greenway, I would mention it earlier on, but the connections to Steve Rue and to Glenmore, and you have the new community shop in Glenmore, so there's a huge amount of things happening in the area. And to be part of that is a very exciting kind of and satisfying kind of thing to be involved in. And you just hope that your involvement helps to move the thing on. Do you know what I mean? So, that'll be my summary of South Kilkenny. Now, we have, as you're probably aware, major issue with the 2 national roads coming down. So it might be wrong of me not to mention them, but they we'd say we had 2 fatalities since Christmas on the N25, and I do know there's huge concerns about the absence of the funding coming down to date to allow them to move on, because there was a huge effort and continues to be a huge effort to try and bring them to the next stage. But I go back to what I was saying about infrastructure earlier on. Unless the funding is in place, you can't bring them forward. And we'd say, it's sometimes, when I was saying earlier on, a lot of people talk about budgets, and I keep reminding people, a budget is a financial plan. It's a plan. And we'd say the plan is that those roads would be brought up to a standard that 21st century Ireland deserves. You know what I mean? And you can't, we say, as a public representative in South Kilkenny, you can't not do everything that you possibly can to say, let's, whatever it takes to get the departments to release the money to allow them to go forward, because they've come to this phase that they're at, of phase 3, and they need to progress. And people deserve to know that in a couple of years' time, they will have the standards that they deserve, and that they're as safe as they possibly can be.
Tomas, I remember chatting to you a number of years ago, and you said politics for you was about three things: communication, courtesy, and common sense.
Yes.
And from our conversation that we're having, I'm sure you'd agree with me, Roisin, that there is a lot of, from in your work, you are very courteous to people, as you said, from all political parties and none. You use your common sense, absolutely, and at times it's not all that common. And communication. Would you say that principle that I've mentioned there has served you well over the last 21 years? 21 and a half years, sorry.
I spent many years in the classroom, and I remember, we say maybe an economics student that I had, and I hadn't seen him for years. And he came into the school, and he said to me, economics is a social science which studies the relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. I had taught him that 15 years previously. And the first thing he said to me was that. He said, I'll never forget what you said. I would have bet Paul would never have remembered communication, courtesy, and common sense. It was a lesson that was given to me by somebody who said if I wanted to get on in politics, they were the three things that he said that he would advise me on. And I've always tried to adhere to them, because if you respect people, you're courteous. If you want to, if I say, get the changes that you think people deserve, you actually have to communicate with people. And it is all about the communication. Now, I'm a quiet man, as most people know. You don't have to be loquacious or anything else, but there is something in the communication that is awful important. And then sometimes we lose sight of what is common sense. And common sense is if I say you take, because it is in the nature of what your job is, you have to take advice, and you have to distill that advice that you get to take it on board. And sometimes what can happen is it may not be the common sense that you had previously, because it changes because you've taken on board the opinions of others. But that comes back then to the other side of it. If you have come to a new conclusion, you need to be able to communicate that to somebody, and you have to do it in a courteous way. And I'd like to think, in my dealings with people, that I would exhibit those qualities. I think it's awful important. And then I'll go back to something I said earlier on to both of you. My standard has always been, as an elected representative, can I vote for myself? And I can, if I adhere to those principles. You know what I mean? And I'd like to think over the years I have, and I'd like to think that other people would agree with me that I have.
And I remember you saying as well before, when I go out that gate, I only have one vote.
Yes.
Which is your own. So you never take for granted the support that you've got at the last election, because really all votes they're borrowed until the next election.
They are, and don't forget, and I hope now we're on time, but we say don't forget that you go back to people. People have the choice. And when anybody stands for election, they've 10, 12 people that they can give their vote to, number 1, 2, 3. And if you get there, number 1, I'd like to think I've earned it. You know what I mean? And it is true that when I do, I kind of actually notionally put my finger up like this on the doorstep and I say, I have won, and I'm going to earn the rest of them. And I have to say, most people absolutely understand that you do call to them and they want you to call. And to me, I go back to it, it is a courtesy to call and it's a mark of respect to ask. Because if you don't ask, you're not respecting their right to choose who they are going to vote for, if you know what I mean. And it's important from my point of view. I'm no more a fellow well met than anybody else. But we'd say, I do know I work hard, and I think anybody knows me knows that I don't have enough time in the day, and I do fall behind. I'm human like everybody else, but I do work hard, and I'd like to be able to say that when I knock on a door, that I have earned the right to knock and to ask, but it's people's choice as to whether it's me or somebody else. And if it's somebody else, I respect their choice, you know. And maybe what can happen is, because it does make a difference, if I'm not their number one choice, perhaps I'm their number two. And the number two could make the difference.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
You know what I mean? And all you have to do is be in an election count centre, any election, and it does matter. You know?
It does. Sometimes it's the number 2s and 3s that get you over the line.
Yeah, no, you do need enough number ones. You do to be into the race. But I suppose now I'm not into. It's something that I'm not good at. The publicity for myself and everything else, because I'd rather work, and I'd hope that the work is its own publicity in terms of the people you're working with know you're working. You know what I mean? But it is their right to choose, and we'd say I would never take that from them. In fact, what I think, and we're blessed that we do have that, and where that right to choose decides, because if I mentioned earlier on about what's going on in the world, and where that right to choose is taken away from people, and where the right to choose is not even the way things are decided, because other factors decide things. And that, I mean, in my ideal world, everybody would have that mechanism by which they can progress. You know what I mean? So, but it's nice that you remembered.
Well, Tomas Breathnach, you know, this has been, again, a fascinating conversation that Paul and I always used to have with you when we were in the Labour Party. And we're going to come down again, and you're going to show us around.
I am. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
You're going to show us around the centres and around the place and all the work and the great community that Kilmacow is. And we really look forward to that. But we also really want to say thank you so much for inviting us down to Kilmacow to see this most magnificent community that life is all about, and what living is about. It's about the community.
Absolutely.
Tomas Breathnach, thank you so much indeed.
Thank you
for coming and narrowing us down to your glimpse of the world.
Thanks, and I thank you for your time. And we'd say I hope that our conversation, that you've enjoyed it, and that anybody that watches might take something from it. That's all I can ask.
Absolutely. As always, Tomas, I always found when talking to you, when you speak, I listen and I learn. So
thanks.
It was really great chatting to you today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
that's it from the Irish Political Roundup from Kilmacow in South Kilkenny with Councillor Tomas Breathnach.